Who is at the center of your life story? In Genesis 11, we have this amazing story. The people all speak one language and they have this new invention, the brick. Can you imagine, for the first time in history, rather than building with different stones of different shapes, they have symmetrical bricks to build with? And the people plot. They plan to build a city with a tower that reaches for the heavens, to make a name for themselves so that they will not be scattered across the earth. And you might think, well, so what? They want to build a city. Big deal. And surely God's plan was always to have a city. The Genesis story begins in a garden but ends in Revelation in a city. But this is not God's plan. This is a shortcut. They're trying to skip to a place without God. The text in fact says, they said, "Come, let us build a city." Come, let us. That same phrase used in Genesis 1 as God says, "Come, let us make man in our image." The idea here being is that they almost saw themselves as being God. They wanted to take his place. There were three big issues. Firstly, there was the tower. They wanted to build a tower that would reach for the heavens. See, they wanted to grasp something that did not belong to them. Throughout the biblical story, we see time and time again that it's not about us building things to God, but about God coming down to us. Secondly, they wanted to make a name for themselves. It wasn't about giving God glory, but about giving themselves glory. They wanted their own name in lights. And thirdly, they were building this city so that they would not be scattered over all the earth. But in Genesis 9, the last command they've been given by God is to multiply and to fill the earth. You see, by filling the earth, they would have to be dependent upon God. But by building a city, they could depend upon one another. There was almost no need for God. They were therefore breaking God's command. They'd really swapped obedience for comfort. And so God comes down to see their tower. There's almost a sense of comedy in this, that their tower is so small and insignificant that God has to come down just to have a look at it. And there is no flood, but in his grace, God muddles up their languages. They begin to babble, and he scatters them across the earth. Who is the center of your story? Three great questions emerge from this story. First of all, have you become too focused upon what you're building rather than who God is? Secondly, are you more bothered about making a name for yourself than you are about making a name for God? And thirdly, are you being obedient, or have you settled for a life of comfort? Rather than us building a tower to God, God sends Jesus down to earth. And Jesus shows us how to make a name for the Father, giving him glory. And he shows us what obedience looks like as we pick up our cross and follow him. Not always comfortable, but always obedient. And then, on the day of Pentecost, as the Spirit of God equips those early disciples, there is not babbling, but clarity as they speak in different languages, empowered by the Spirit of God. Will you make Jesus the very center of your story? Will you find your story in his story and allow the Spirit of God to empower you? you.